Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna. just trying to see it here. Well, I just sent it out yesterday. Okay, here it is. Yeah, it's 872. It's a specific, it's your number. It's a number that's generated from your account. So it's not your personal meeting number, but it's just when you create a new event, it just generates a new number. Yeah.
I have a problem getting on typing it in. Okay, want to give me
872
872?
7237 9129. I can try to send this to you.
Send in the link.
And what's
Password, sorry.
there's no password this time.
Very good.
Yeah, I'll try to send it by WhatsApp. Okay, great. Hare Krishna. Very well.
He's in? Oh, I see him.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Haribol, Jai Prabhupada.
Oh,
Balabhadra,
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
I'm going to totally depend on you for the words because I don't have them anywhere else. And even if I do, I can't really, it's hard to change.
Okay.
So when we're chanting the last line, Govinda Mani Purusham, you should go to the next verse.
Yes. Yes.
You have to be a little ahead of me because if you wait to the end, then I'm just going to be, some verses I know, but somebody told me on the recording I sang it out of order.
Okay, I'll look it up. I'll find it.
So as long as you're ahead, and the last 2 Saturday nights when I did programs at this time, the electricity went out and I lost the internet.
okay.
And so hopefully that won't happen.
Yes. Well, there's a hurricane just going past here, so we also might lose power. If we do, and you're still on, please continue because I think this will still be live, and we'll hopefully come back on when the hurricane's passed.
Okay.
Would you like to start now? I'll do the screen
Yeah.
share for yes.
We're going to begin, we'll begin by speaking about it, right? You wanted to begin with, no, I thought we could talk about it before we chanted.
Yeah.
Do you have the lyrics on them?
So, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Ti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sannivari Paschatya Rasatani. The Brahma Samhita is, I think, a unique book in many ways, at least for the Westerner, because it's describing something that the Western mind has a difficult time understanding, which is the nature of the spiritual world. And sometimes Prabhupada would try to explain the nature of that world. And because it's a perverted of this world, devotees had a very difficult time understanding it. And we're always trying to understand it from our perspective and kind of associate it with something here. So as you all know the story, or you should know, Lord Brahma came from the navel of Lord Narayan. He was the only living entity, and his job was meant to be the creator, not of the living entities, but the forms, not of matter, but take matter and form it into living entities and planets. But in the beginning, he was alone, he didn't know what to do. And he heard in the air the word tapa, which means austerity. So he decided to do austerity, went into meditation, and after many, many, many years of austerity, he had a vision of Krishna. and he had a vision of Goloka Vrindavan. And that vision was described. He sang it, and every verse ended with Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He sang it. And what he sang was what he was seeing. He was seeing the spiritual world. He was seeing Radha and Krishna. And he was singing a description. And as you know, the last line of every verse ends with Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda. So this Brahma Samhita was lost. Nobody had it. And when Mahaprabhu was traveling, I forget. Mohan, do you know where he found it? What city he found it in India, the Brahma Samhita? Microphone. Can't hear.
We can't hear you.
Okay. Now.
Can't hear you, Prabhu.
His microphone, yeah.
Do you have your sound?
About that. It's in South India though, but I don't remember the city exactly.
Does anybody know? Anybody remember?
South India.
Anyway, he found one chapter. Mahaprabhu found one chapter. So this is Brahma Samhita, the beginning of creation. And 500 years ago, he finds one chapter of that book. And Jiva Goswami had written a commentary on that. And if you try to read that, it's a bit esoteric because
Okay.
you found.
I found here. It's in Tiruvattar in Tamil Nadu, in Adikeshav Temple.
Adikeshav Temple. So this was a big revelation. And then you may have heard that recording of Srila Prabhupada. Chintamani Prakadashagaman. He was singing, and then they overdubbed Sarod and some Indian instruments, probably like 1969. And then he explains a little bit about this. And he was saying that this is Lord Brahma's mature realization that's being described. And then he was saying we should enter into the mood of this. What's the mood? I worship Govinda, the prime of the Lord. Lord, and then we also understand that we don't understand everything, but by chanting it, we feel something and we become purified. And there's a meter to it. There's a traditional there's different meters for Sanskrit according to the shlokas. The shlokas are spoken and they're meant to go with different meters depending on the number of syllables. So this meter, as you know, is Chintamani Pakarusharman Sukalpa Vriksha Lakshavriteshu Shurabhi Paliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. So that's a traditional. So I botched it up a little bit by adding chords to it and changed a few things to maybe make it more acceptable to the Western ear. And it took on kind of a life of its own. And I made the recording. We just made the recording for fun, actually. We had no intention of anything happening with it. But of course, because we made it, we put it out there. And it became my most popular recording. And due to the nature of the prayers, the nature of the meter, And I think also the nature of this combination of this traditional meter with a little more westernized arrangement. And so many devotees have told me they grew up listening to it, then they finally met me. Women have said they gave birth listening to it. It's just amazing. I had like no idea. It's special. I performed it in public, on the street, like in a park, and people would come by, and they would just stop and like, what's this? It's very they can't describe it, but they're drawn to it. So I performed it all over the world. Devotees love it. Not only is Krishna described and the gopis described, but there's philosophy described as well. There's description of the different parts of the universe, how you get love of God, how you see Krishna. So many things are described there, and you can read the translation. Now, Koramani, I have a question. We want to chant all the verses? How much time do we have?
We have, and usually we go till 2:30, so it's 90 minutes
Okay.
Hawaii Standard Time. So if we could chant the whole thing, we'll go to the spiritual world, I'm sure. So however long you can spare, Gurudev.
Okay, so if we have more time, then in between each verse, I have a segment where we sing Govinda. So we can do that. That brings it up to like 30, 40 minutes. So we would just ask you to mute, and you can sing along with me. If you know the verses, well, the verses are going to be posted. So you can sing along. And then in between each verse, we'll sing Govinda. And then if you don't know that part, then you will learn it, because at the end of each verse, I'll sing. And we can enter into the mood. Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. It's kind of interesting because Brahma is describing Krishna and describing the spiritual world. And the last verse is kind of like a conclusion. It's like, this is why I worship him, because he's like this. It's almost like he's saying, this is why I worship him, and this is why there's no one else to worship him, and this is why you should worship him. It's a bit like that, it's like if you're describing Maui, it's like this. It has beautiful mountains and beautiful beaches and this and that and perfect weather. This is why I live here, or I invested in this stock, or invested in this industry because it's growing and everyone's going to need the product, etc. This is why I did it. So that Govinda Madi Purusham is a little bit in that mood. It's like, who else is there to worship? When you describe what he is, this makes him my worshipful Lord. So it's kind of like a culmination of each verse, that this is who he is, or the verses describe what he does. This is what he does. Therefore, I worship him. This is how he creates. This is the relationship we have with him. Then worship him. We're not able to see the English. We don't have the English, do we?
I could look it up. I could get it.
It's too late now. I was just thinking, maybe for another time, we could have the English in between the Sanskrit, and then when we're chanting the Govinda, we could see the English. Although that would kind of disrupt the Govinda, but it would. You want to read the English first?
Sure. Let me see if I can find it easily.
You read the English, and I'll play background music while you're reading it. I'll play the melody. Next time we'll put it on the slideshow. I wasn't thinking we needed it, but I think it would be good if we read it all to help us get in the mood.
Do you want me to, I found it, Gurudev. Did you want me to share the screen and then?
Okay, okay.
Okay. Everybody see that okay?
I'm on a computer. It's-
Gurudev, did you want to read this or do you want me to read this?
I'll play the background, you read it.
Okay.
You read it to go with the music. Can you do that dramatically?
Only with Krishna's mercy. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock feathers, with a figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locked, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamsundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayam by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, and there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord, whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed by the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual Ras. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Sham Sundar, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna, and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Ram, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose effulgence is the source of the non-differentiated Brahman mentioned in the Upanishads, being differentiated from the infinity of glories of the mundane universe, appears as the indivisible, infinite, limitless truth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is the absolute substantive principle, being the ultimate entity in the form of the support of all existence, whose external potency embodies the three mundane qualities, viz. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and diffuses the Vedic knowledge regarding the mundane world. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose glory ever triumphantly dominates the mundane world by the activity of his own pastimes being reflected in the mind of recollecting souls as the transcendental entity of ever blissful cognitive Ras. Lowest of all is located Devi Dham, mundane world. Next above it is Mahesha Dham, abode of Mahesh. Above Mahesh Dham is placed Hari Dham, abode of Hari. And above them all is located Krishna's own realm named Goloka. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who has allotted their respective authorities to the rulers of those graded realms. The external potency Maya, who is of the nature of the shadow of the Chit potency, is worshipped by all people as Durga, the creating, preserving, and destroying agency of this mundane world. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda in accordance with whose will Durga conducts herself, whose will Durga conducts herself. Just as milk is transformed into curd by the action of acids, but yet the effect curd is neither the same as nor different from its cause, milk. So I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, of whom the state of Shambhu is transformation for the performance of the work of destruction. The light of one candle being communicated to other candles, although it burns separately in them, is the same in its quality. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who exhibits himself equally in the same mobile manner in his various manifestations. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who, assuming his own great subjective form, who bears the name of Shesha, replete with all accommodating potency, and reposing in the causal ocean with the infinity of the world, in the pores of his hair, enjoys creative sleep, yoga nidra. Brahma and other lords of the mundane worlds, appearing from the pores of hair of Mahavishnu, remain alive as long as the duration of one exhalation of the latter, Mahavishnu. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, whose subjective personality, Mahavishnu, is the portion of portion. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, from whom the separated subjective portion, Brahma, receives his power for the regulation of the mundane world, just as the sun manifests some portion of his own light in all the effulgent gems that bear the names of Suryankanta, etc. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, whose lotus feet are always held by Ganesh on the pair of emerald protruding from his elephant head in order to obtain power for his function of destroying all the obstacles on the path of progress of the three worlds. The three worlds are composed of 9 elements: fire, earth, ether, water, air, direction, time, soul, and mind. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, from whom they originate, in whom they exist, and into whom they enter at the time of the universal cataclysm. The sun, who is the king of all planets, full of infinite effulgence, the image of the good soul, is as the eye of this world. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, in pursuance of whose order the sun performs his journey, mounting the wheel of time. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, by whose conferred power are maintained the manifested potencies that are found to exist of all virtues, all vices, the Vedas, the penances, and all jivas, from Brahma to the meanest insect. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who burns up to their roots all fruitive activities of those who are imbued with devotion and impartiality, ordains for each the due enjoyment of the fruits of one's activities, of all those who walk in the path of work in accordance with the chain of their previously performed works, no less in the case of the tiny insect that bears the name of Indragopa than in that of Indra, king of the Devas. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, the meditators of whom, by meditating upon him under the sway of wrath, amorous passion, natural friendly love, fear, parental affection, delusion, reverence, and willing service, attain to bodily forms befitting the nature of their contemplation. I worship that transcendental seat known as Svetadvip, where as loving consorts, the Lakshmis, in their unalloyed spiritual essence, practice the amorous service of the Supreme Lord Krishna as their only lover, where every tree is a transcendental purpose tree, where the soil is the purpose gem, all water is nectar, every word is a song, every gate is a dance. The flute is the favorite attendant. Effulgence is full of transcendental bliss, and the supreme spiritual entities are all enjoyable and tasty. Where numberless milk cows always emit transcendental oceans of milk, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away, even for the space of half a moment. That realm is known as Goloka, only to a very few self-realized souls in this world. Hare Krishna. Something that I should say is that we love the Brahma Samhita so much that when we were married, we actually asked Gurudev to come from Florida to Vancouver to sing the Brahma Samhita for us for our wedding. And everyone was in tears. It was so beautiful. So
Hare Krishna. Huh.
Hare Krishna. Yes.
So we have the PowerPoint. We're going to play show the PowerPoint.
Yes.
When sometimes devotees ask, when I go back to the spiritual world, will I remember my material life and everything here, and my family, my home, my dog, my favorite pot, my favorite instrument, my favorite painting? And the answer is, in the light of eternity, our whole material existence will appear like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second. It's not even memorable. And the reality is what we're chanting. That's what's real. And this is a reflection of that. And when we're there, it won't even count as time and eternity. Isn't that interesting? So Balabhadra, I can't sing without the verses, and you'll always have to be. As soon as we hit Govinda, then that's your sign to go to the next verse.
I have to tell you, Gurudev, it's actually me behind the.
Oh, okay.
Yes, for Balabhadra. That should be able to be on this. Just need one moment here.
Just now coming?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just trying to figure out how to prompt this and screen share at the same time. I think I've got it now. Thanks. Sorry for the delay.
Govinda, 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 Govinda. I have to get the. Do you have Balaram font on your computer?
Do I have
The Balaram font, otherwise we won't be able to read it.
Balaram font?
It's written in the Balaram font. If you had Balaram font, it would come up. Balabhadra, you have the Balaram font on your computer?
I see.
If not, you're going to have to get it off the internet and just show it off the internet.
I see.
If you've never downloaded the Balaram, if you have the folio database, you have the Balaram font.
I could pull up the.
Can you pull up your fonts in the PowerPoint and see if you have Balaram? Which I probably don't, because it would have.
See here. Maybe what I could do, Gurudev, just because of time, I could pull up the previous reading that I had. I don't know if that's large enough.
You'll have to make it much bigger. Govinda, 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 Govinda.
Okay, Gurudev, is this okay? Is this large enough?
I just have to move you all out of the way. Yeah. Chintanani prakarshat mansu kapabriksha Rakshabriteshu surabhi rabi pariyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shata Shambrama Sevyamana Govinda Maripusha Tamaham Bhajami Govinda Maripusha Tamaham Bhajami Govinda, 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 Govinda. Everyone, Govinda, Govinda. Govinda, Benam Kumantam Marabinda, Dalayataksham, Vahabitam, Samasitam, Urashandarangan. Kanda Pukoti Kamaniya Shesh Soma Govindam Maripurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Maripurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda 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 Govinda, Lola Chandra Karasad, Vanamala Banshi, Tadnanganam Panayakiri, Kalapilasam, Shaimam Kribam Lalita, Niyata Prakasham, Govindari Prusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govindam Adi Prusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govinda, 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 Ganijasya Sakalem, Vyapriti Manti, Shanti Panti Kalayanti, Shiram Jaganti, Ananda Chinnaya Sadhu, Jvala Vigrahasya, Goindamadi Prusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Goindamadi Prusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govinda, 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 Adhaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam, Adhyam Purana Purusham Davayavanamsha, Vedeshu Durlavam Durlavam Atma Bhakta, Govindamadi Purusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govindamadi Purusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govinda, 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 Pantastikoti Shatavatsara Sampragamya, Vayortapi Manaso Muni Pungavanam, Sopyastiyat Prabhavna Sinna Vichinta Tate, Govindamadi Prusham, Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda 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 Ekopisara Chaitam Jagadantakoti Niyat Chaturashti Jagaranda Chayayaranta Angantarashta Paramana Chayantarashtam Govindamari Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govindamari Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda 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 Yadbhavi Bhavi Taddiyo Manojasthataiva Samprapyurupa Mahima Shanayanu Bhusha Shuktar Yameva Nigama Pratitastu Bhakti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda Govinda right everybody Govinda Govinda Anam Chinmaya Rasa Pratitavi Tavi Tavi Eva Nijurupataya Kalavi Goloka Eva Nivasat Akilat Mabuta Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda Govinda Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Shantasadaiva hridayeshu lokayanti Yan shamashanramachinta gunasarupam Govinnamadi prusham Tamam jami Govindamadi prusham Tamaham bhajami Bhajami Govinda 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 Ramadi Murti Shukala Niyamena Tishtan Nandavatara Makura Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Shayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumanyo Govinnamadi Prusham Tamaham bhajami Govinnamadi Prusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda 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 Hey hey Govinda 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 Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanta Koti Kotishu Sesha Vasudadhi Vibhuti Vinam Tad Brahmanishkalam Anantam Sesha Bhutam Govinnamadi Prusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda 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 Maya Nityasya Jagadanda Shitani Sute Traigunyatad Vishaya Veda Vitaya Mana Sadbhavalamni Parasattam Vishuddha Sattam Govinnamadi Prusham Tamaham bhajami Govinnamadi Prusham Tamaham bhajami Bolo bolo. Govinda. Everybody. Govinda. Govinda. Anandamaya Rasatat Mataya Manashu Neya Praninam Pratipalam Smaratamupetya Lilaitena Bhuvanani Jaya Jajasham Gominamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda, 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 Golokanamni Nijadamni Lechitasya Devi Mahesha Haridamashu Teshu Teshu Tehite Prabhava Nichaya Vihitascha Yena Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda 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 Sristi Sthiti Pralaya Sadhana Shakti Rekha Chayir Jasha Bhuvanani Vibhakti Durga It's Changu Mama Piyasha Chitesta Tesa Govinam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Haribo Govinda 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 Chiranjita Dari Vikhara Visesha Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Asti Sanjayate Nahitata Pitagashti Hetu Niya Shamutam Apitata Shamupacha Karya Govindam Hari Krishnan Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Hari Krishnan Tamaham Bhajami Bolo Bolo Govinda 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 Diparche Bahida Shantaram Apyupecha Diparte Brarita Hetu Shamana Dharma Yastadrige Bahicha Vishnu Kaya Vibhati Govindam Hari Krishna Tamam Bhajami Govindam Hari Krishna Tamaham Bhajami Everybody Govinda 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 Yat Karna Vajajale Bhajati Sma Yoga Nidramananta Jagaranda Shaloma Kupa Andar Shakti Mavalamya Param Samurti Govinamadi Prusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindamadi Prusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda 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 one more time Govinda Govinda Yasyaekanishvasita kalamatavalambya Jivanti loma vilaja Jagaratanata Vishnu Mahansa Ihayasya Kala Vishesha Govindam Hari Krishna Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Hari Krishna Tamaham Bhajami Govinda, 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 Govinda. One more time. Govinda, Govinda. Vasanyatashma shakaleshu tej tejaha Sriyangiyat prakatayati apitavaratra Brahmaya esha jagarana pidana karta Govindamari Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govindamari Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda, Govinda, Govinda. Hey, hey, Govinda, Govinda. Ya para Palavayugam, Vinitaya Kumbha. Vande Brahma Samhita Ganati Raja Vigyan Vihantam Alamasya Jagatayasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda, Govinda, Govinda. Hey Govinda, Govinda, Govinda. Angi Mahaganganam Ambuma Rudisascha Kalastatatma Manushiti Jagatrayanti Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Ishanti Yascha Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham bhajami Govinda, everyone, Govinda, more time. Govinda. Yatchakuresha Savita Shakala Grahana Jasamasta Suramurti Sejiteja Yasyagya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakra Govinda Mari Purusham Kamaham Bhajami Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda, 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 Dharma Utapapa Nichaya, Shritayastapashi, Brahmadikita Pataga, Padayash Jiva, Yadatamatra Vibhava, Pataka Prabhava, Govinda Maripurusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govinda Maripurusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Tamaham Bhajami, Govinda, Govinda, hey, hey, Govinda, 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 Yasimdrakopamatabendram, Ahosakarma, Vandarupam Padamajjanam, Atanoti, Karmani Nirarati Kintu, Chabati Bhajan, Govinda Maripurusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govinda Maripurusham, Tamaham Bhajami, Govinda, Govinda, hey, hey, Govinda, 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 one more time. Govinda, Govinda, Yam Kravura Kama Sahaja, Pranayati Viti, Vatsalyamo Guru Gaurava, Sevya Bhavai, Sanchinjatasya Sadishim, Dharma Purete, Govinda Maripurusham, tamaham bhajami Govinda Hari Krishna tamaham bhajami Govinda Govinda Haribo Govinda Govinda Hey hey Govinda 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 Hey hey Govinda Govinda Go all the way up to the top, back to the first verse. Chintamani Prakarshan Manchukapa Drikshan Herla Kapiteshu Surabhi Rabbi Padiyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasamrama Seir Yavanam Govinam Haripurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Haripurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda Govinda Hey hey Govinda 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 Hey Govinda Hey hey Govinda Hey hey Govinda Hey hey Govinda Hey Govinda Govinda Hey hey Govinda 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 Srila Prabhupada ki jai Brahma Samhita ki jai
Mahatma Prabhu ki jai.
I have to apologize. Somehow my voice went somewhere and I couldn't find it. So I was struggling a bit, but anyway, I think we transcended the
It was,
modes of nature.
it was transcendental and purifying. It was so purifying and so beautiful. Thank you.
So we are supposed to all live in the spiritual world. We went to the spiritual world. This is where we're supposed to live. And we're in this world to practice how to get to that world. Where every step is a dance, every word is a song.
I'm just wondering if anyone has questions that they'd like to ask about Brahma Samhita. For some, this is the very first time they've heard this bhajan, and so if you want to put any questions in the chat, or you could maybe unmute yourselves and ask. Gurudev, do you remember any experiences with Srila Prabhupada and Brahma Samhita?
Just listening to the recordings. I mean, he quoted Brahma Samhita quite extensively because there are a lot of truths, spiritual truths, aside from the realizations of Brahman, of Brahma and his feelings. There was also philosophy in there, and Prabhupada quoted a lot this verse, Premanjana. Prema means love, Anjana means ointment. Premanjana churita, you put the ointment of love of God on your eyes. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. Shantas sadaya varidayeshu vilokayanti. And if you do that, you'll be able to see Krishna, God, within everyone's heart and within everything. The Prabhupada quoted that verse, Goloka namni nijadamni chaleta tasya, which describes the material and spiritual universes. He quoted that verse a lot. Karmadi nirdhati kintucha bhakti bhajam yas indra gopam. That verse, everyone is suffering karma from the ant all the way up to Brahma himself. So Prabhupada used the Brahma Samhita to make many points because, as I said, there's philosophy in there as well as revelation of the spiritual world. And then Prabhupada would often say, sometimes people would say that Krishna is not God. And Prabhupada said, okay, so show me what God, if he's not, you have to know what is to know what not. So show me what God is. If you have a better God, we'll accept it. And they couldn't. And then Prabhupada would say, well, we have his name, we have his address, phone number, we know his mother, his father, his aunt, uncle, grandmother. So why don't you accept we know? And how we can say we know? Well, this is one of the ways we can say because it's described here. So, and Chintamani Prakara Sadmansu Chin. There's another verse, Chinmaya Rasa Pratitavi. The nature of the spiritual world is it's conscious, it's full of ananda, Chinmaya Rasa, Chinmaya Ananda. So he'd use those verses, whenever he was describing the spiritual world, because those verses are kind of like the seminal description of the spiritual world. And Jiva Goswami written a commentary on Brahma Samhita. And Prabhupada, that's the Brahma Samhita we have, I believe.
And
Bhaktisiddhanta also commented. Yes?
There's a question here about, so Jiva Goswami found the first chapter. Do you know how many chapters there are?
Lord Chaitanya found it.
Oh, sorry.
Well, we know at least there's 5 because he found the 5th. And I somehow have this number like 20 in my head, but I don't know if I actually read that anywhere. But we definitely know for sure there's 5 more chapters. And my sense is, it was long. There's lots more because the nature of the spiritual, it's unlimited. So my sense is there's a lot more out there that we didn't get. But, I wanted to mention something you may not know. So I was first coming to the temple in 1969, which was very early time in our movement. And a lot of the things that we do now were established later. But one thing we did every morning before class, we sang Chintamani Shadimansu Kalpa Vriksha Lakshavriteshu, because Prabhupada, that was his melody. Surabhi Avipalyantam. So Prabhupada said, Lord Chaitanya had his devotees sing this every day, Brahma Samhita. So we chanted maybe 2 or 3 verses before Bhagavatam. Well, we didn't read Bhagavatam, we read Bhagavad Gita, because we didn't know what the Bhagavatam was or how to explain it. As funny as that sounds. So when Prabhupada heard the rendition by Jamuna, go, however that went. Govindam Hare Krishna Tamaham Bhajami. So when Prabhupada heard that, then he said, we will play this every morning, because we were accustomed to sing Brahma Samhita. So then that became institutionalized in ISKCON, those maybe 2 or 3 verses that they sing. So we sang every day. So that was the mood. Lord Chaitanya said, chant it every day. We were chanting it every day. Then that recording came out maybe in 1970, and then Prabhupada said, play it when we greet the deities. So that's the history. Before that, we weren't chanting, as far as I know, Govinda. Maybe we were chanting Govinda to the deities, I can't remember. At least not in the temple I was in, I don't remember. But in any case, even if we were, it's a daily ritual. So the answer to your question was, we know 5, and the next question is, what do you think are in those other 5? Well, you could go back to that place where Lord Chaitanya found it and see if you find the others. I have a feeling Lord Chaitanya just wanted to reveal to the world that chapter and made sure the others disappeared. Maybe the others are too esoteric for people to understand. If you read Brahma Samhita, you'll find a lot of things will make your head spin about the nature of the spiritual world.
Dave, there's another question here.
Okay.
And Dvibhuja Das asks, Hare Krishna Prabhu, sometimes we hear that certain scholars claim that scriptures such as Brahma Samhita and others are not bona fide, that these scriptures were composed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who they consider as best as a Vaishnava saint for the purpose of establishing Krishna to be the supreme personality of Godhead. Can you comment on this?
Scholars. Well, through scholarship, so many things will be misunderstood. This is accepted, at least in our line of teachers, this is accepted as being spoken by Brahma, not by Lord Chaitanya. The thing is, in different lines, they have different understandings of different things. And I'm not exactly sure of the history, but I have a hunch that when things get passed down, something got changed along the way. And the history was understood differently through different chains of disciplic succession. Not that Lord Chaitanya found it, but that he wrote it. So these things happen, but at least from the authoritative sources we follow, that's not the conclusion. There are many things you can find that are different than what Prabhupada taught. So we're following what Prabhupada gave us. That's why he gave us so many books. So he said it, Lord Chaitanya found it. That's the accepted history of our Acharya and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. Yes. What else? Other questions?
There was a couple comments that the Brahma Samhita is 100 chapters,
Oh, really?
and that it mentions it in the foreword of Brahma Samhita.
Oh, okay. 100 chapters, we only have one. We have the 5th chapter. So my hunch was true, that it's probably much longer than I thought. Yeah. When we go back to Godhead, then, you know, one of the interesting things we've heard is that the bhakti teachings, the Vedas, they're all more vast on the higher planets because people have longer duration of life and they have greater ability to understand. So there's really no limitation in describing Krishna. And when you go back to Godhead, you'll have eternity to hear about Krishna and talk about Krishna. And still, you'll never get to the end. There'll always be something more you don't understand. And Prabhupada said, even Krishna cannot calculate himself because he's always expanding. So as soon as he makes the calculation, he's expanded beyond his calculation. So even God can't understand himself because he's always expanding.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Yes.
My understanding, I read, English is my third language. I tried to read the Brahma Samhita from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Is very complicated English, extremely.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't it?
Even-
Honestly, there are
yeah.
words that I never heard in my entire life.
Yeah, me too. First,
Oh,
English is your first language. You'll need a dictionary. Also,
yeah.
the reason being is that he was trying to establish bhakti as a scholarly tradition. He was trying to establish it amongst the intellectuals. So that's why he wrote that way.
Wow.
You could say, in a sense, to cater to their needs or to impress them that this is not something just for grandmothers and grandchildren and their grandchildren. But it's very deep. And even if he were to express the Brahma Samhita in simple language, it still would be difficult to understand just the concepts he's expressing. And also, another reality is that there are things that we may not understand that we will someday understand, but not necessarily because we understand it intellectually. We may understand it, like you may read Brahma Samhita and not understand it, and one day you're doing some seva, and then you understand it. Like you may have heard the story of a professor. He wanted to speak to Bhaktisiddhanta, and Bhaktisiddhanta was busy, so he said, you can speak to my disciples, and after you speak to them, you can come back, and we can talk. And the disciples were also busy. They were cleaning the deity plates. So they asked the professor, can you wait? And if you like, while you're waiting, you could help us. So he helped. It's India, humble professor. He helped. And then the Brahmachari said, okay, now we're finished. We can answer your question. He said, no, I'm fine. He went back to Bhaktisiddhanta and said, and he asked, did they answer your question? He said, I got the answer when I was washing the plates. So it also works like that. There definitely are things that will not be understood by the mind, but only understood by a pure heart. And that's just a spiritual reality. And if people don't understand that, they think when we say things like that, they think it's a cop-out of faith, or it's not intellectual, or it's blind faith. But it's a reality because the spiritual is transcendental, and there's some things which are just beyond our experience that we won't understand. As Prabhupada said, some things you won't understand until you go there. Because sometimes he was asked questions he wouldn't answer. He said, when you go, you'll find out. Like he couldn't explain it. We didn't have the capacity to understand it. So,
Oh, go ahead, sir.
yes.
There is another kind of interesting point about I I heard a few times that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, when he was in school, it took 3 months to learn full English. And after the 3 months, even his English teacher could not, get close to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because these are liberated souls. And he had memorized the Gita at 7, I think. They're not ordinary persons. Yeah.
There is one instance when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was chanting japa around Navadvip, and some disciples started making this sign like something stink, something stink. They were complaining. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, "You smell something, but I smell like a very fragrant, aroma."
Wow.
He was in another world.
One time he saw the Panchatattva in Mayapur coming up the street doing kirtan.
Haribo.
And he said to his disciple, "Do you see?" And the disciple said, "See what?" He said, "You don't see the Panchatattva coming up?" "No, I don't see. There's no Panchatattva." So sometimes people reporters especially, would ask Prabhupada, "Have you seen God?" And he would say, "Yes, I've seen. You can also see. I can show you." Very nonchalant, like it's not a big thing. And sometimes if he felt that they were a bit challenging, he would say, "Will you believe me if I tell you?" Sometimes he would say, "If you don't know what God is, how will you, if I say I've seen him, how will you know?" So he would play like that. But then one time it was funny. They said, "Can you see God?" He said, "You can also see God. He's on the cover of my new book." They're not making a distinction, a picture or... But the acharyas explain that as a devotee advances, when he's chanting, he sees the leelas of Krishna. He actually sees them. And Prabhupada explains that in the second canto. He says it's like a transcendental television. So, and then the acharyas explain that a higher stage of seeing the leela is when you're chanting, you actually are in the leela. So you're in that leela while your physical body is here, but your spiritual body is engaged in that pastime. So there's this dimension that is reached in consciousness. And no one will see you. No one will see what you're doing. But you're crying or you're laughing. You're in that dimension in your consciousness. So these are, mystical, you could call them mystical, spiritual realities. But from the spiritual perspective, it's just normal. It's not mystical. It's just the way it is. It's not bound by the dimensions of our time and space. Any other questions?
How often should we chant the Brahma Samhita, Gurudev?
How what?
How often should we chant Brahma Samhita?
At least a few verses every day.
Bye.
Or you just put the recording on every day.
Okay.
A lot of people play it when they're doing deity worship.
Very nice. And
Yes.
and I don't know if it's too soon to reveal, but there's exciting things on the horizon for
Yes.
making a new recording of Brahma Samhita.
This will be the what's the name? What's the name when you do something and it becomes like the, I wouldn't say flagship, it becomes the new standard. We're working on a recording which will become the new standard for Brahma Samhita, maybe. I mean, the most enduring rendition of it. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. We're going to have the BBC London Orchestra playing with us.
Very cool. And so if anyone has any leads onto where to find the other 99 chapters,
There is no being revealed according what the devotee says. There is no being revealed. That's what they say.
I think Lord Chaitanya didn't want it to be revealed.
Maybe too much for Kali Yuga. Is there,
Brahma.
are there any more questions before we close?
That was beautiful, though.
We can do it again. I was having a hard time singing, so and I was having more fun on the keyboard than singing. I couldn't sing that well, so I went to the keyboard. But it's always transcendental, and devotees always get very inspired chanting this. And one day, when we finish the new version, then we'll try to perform it live with those instruments and samples.
Bye.
You can you go to Mahatma's music. Mahatma's without an apostrophe. Mahatmasmusic.com. Most of my music is there, and then I think I have a YouTube channel, Mahatma Das, with my music. So we have many on the YouTube channel. There should be lots of live versions. Anyway, if you Google Brahma Samhita Mahatma, there are lots of live versions of this. And if you're into rock and roll, there's even a rock version. Brahma Samhita Mahatma Das Rock. There's about 7 verses. This devotee was dying to do a rock version, so he did the music. I didn't want to sing it. And I came to his house and I said, I made an excuse. I said, I have to leave in 10 minutes. He goes, that's fine. I just need 7 verses. So I couldn't get out of it. So now there's a rock and roll version. And I didn't want to do it. And all the young devotees said, oh no, we like this. It's rock, it's straight rock and roll. About 7 verses of Brahma Samhita.
I think
So-
there's an hour-long video that a devotee from Germany or
I don't know if that's been put up yet, but we just did a new video of Brahma Samhita.
yes,
So that would be like 20 minutes.
I think it's on your Facebook page.
It's on my Facebook page. It should then be in my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You could look there, and there's a nice video.
Guy, well, I can't think of a better way to spend an afternoon where there's a hurricane approaching the island. I felt very sheltered with this beautiful chanting. Thank you so much, Gurudev, for sharing this.
Is
Transcendental.
that going to be a serious hurricane? Like a damaging one?
It's kind of it's skirting across the top of the islands, but not hitting land. So.
Oh. Surfers are happy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very nice, very nice.
Okay. So, yes.
Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo
Srila
namaha.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Mahatma Prabhu.
Mahatma Ji ki jai.
Jai.
Nandi, Hari Hari.
Hare
All the devotees. Jai
Krishna.
Nishimadev. Haribol.
Haribol,
Haribol.
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 Haribol. Haribol.